Yeah, so I think the main topics we are going to talk about today is definitely the hamster and his or its companion, or the other way around, Minsk and its hamster, whatever whatever you prefer. As I think this is the most debated deck within the last few weeks since it was released, and also there was this incident with Zap, the organizers for their tournament decided to ban Minsk and Boo, which I still think is not a good thing to do. Of course, it might have been frustrating for a few players to play against Minsk and Boo because it's obviously very oppressive and good at what it's doing. But on the other hand, these big tournaments always offer some data to evaluate if a card is really as broken as expected. And the reasoning was, I guess, that back in the days there was Ragavan and Inala and Urzar, and all these cards or decks were present and dominating at master sessions, Zap master sessions, and they simply wanted to prevent that. But on the other hand, I think their big events also showed that, okay, we have a problem with these decks, and that's why the decision later on was made to exclude them from the format. And
I sort of disagree.
Okay.
Because I think the tournament was like a week after release of the set, or less.
Now for Minsk and Boo, you mean?
Yeah, for the Zap tournament was very, very close after the release of the set. So there's like a couple of, I think, just in terms of like how fair it is to have people come to the tournament with those cards, because like one part is people that want to play the card have to get it first. So if it's that close after release, not a lot of card market deliveries are going to make it in time, and it might have been an issue for some people to get the card. And also, you have this issue of you have a big tournament that people have been preparing for, and a card comes out that people haven't had the chance to play test against in their tournaments. They could have proxied it, but in terms of just like normal legal play, people haven't had a chance to play against it yet. And you just have this kind of this big rock that you're dropping into the pool that is the meta, where there's gonna be a big splash, and people have to adjust, and doing that right before a 200-man tournament, which happens like twice a year, 4-hour format. I think it's fair for the tournament organizers to say, okay, you don't have to deal with this card. That's for the future people to worry about. Play your tournament, and yeah.
Okay, so I've just checked. The release of Battle of Baldur's Gate was on 10th of June, and the Zap Masters happened at July 2nd. So that's
Wait, really?
Yes, 3 weeks in between, and I think that's
okay. No, then I take that back. Then I take that back. I thought I had it in my brain that there was a very short gap between the tournament and the release of the set. Okay. Are you talking about the pre-release release of it, or like the day that it was spoiled, or the day that it actually came out? The release date of the set?
No, the release date of the set should be the 10th of June, according to Card Market. Yeah, exactly. So the pre-release date should have been 7 days before, right? On the 3rd of June.
Yeah.
And even if not, let's say it's the 17th of June, there is still 2 weeks. Okay, 2 weeks is a bit short for metagame adaptation, I agree to that. But it's still possible. And it's also possible to get your hands on a copy of Minsk and Boo.
Yeah, I totally. 3 weeks, of course. I think if I was thinking that the set release was on the Friday and the set came out on the Saturday, and that the tournament was during that weekend. That's the picture that I had in my mind.
But nevertheless, the card was excluded from this event, and Rafine was omnipresent. I think there were like 4 or 5 top 8, if I remember correctly, 5. I just checked it. There was Lightpaw, Zytus, Will Lucas Luros as the current Storm deck version. And then there was another Raffine in top 16. But yeah, 5 Raffines in top 8. Some players or people said that this is some kind of a forecast how a format could look like without Minsc and Boo, because Minsc and Boo actually had a good matchup against Raffine, or the other way around. Raffine had a bad matchup against Minsc and Boo. At least the tempo variation. So it's an interesting result. Would have been interesting how it would have looked like with Minsc and Boo if probably some of them would have made top 8 as well. But we had the Universal Prime Fest recently. I think by the time we record this session, it was 1 week ago only. So last weekend.
6 days ago, yep.
Yeah, exactly. And the outcome was quite interesting to me. Gidrock won the tournament. Then, as you already said, there were 2 Minsc and Boo. There was Danik, there was Lightpaws. Lightpaws is an interesting one because it actually has a good matchup against Gruul due to the protection and life gain. We have niv-mizzet, Tivit, and another Storm deck. So it's quite diverse. If we look into the top 16, there's also Gris and Hogak, another 2 Minsc and Boos. Raffine, another Tivit. Sviloon, also interesting. I think amongst the mono blue control decks, you more often than not see Venser and sometimes Octavia, but I think many decks play Sviloon as a swap. I haven't spotted Sviloon as a main commander making it into top 16 yet.
Yeah, I think I've seen it at some, or maybe not top, not the size of a tournament. I think there have been some results in small tournaments.
Yeah, the list looks also very interesting. Plays a couple of new cards. Ledger Shredders, definitely something that you see more often. It's a powerful card.
It's definitely a powerful card. You see its impact in Modern. I think it's a bit more difficult to trigger in our format, but it's definitely a good card.
Right. The list plays a Trinket Mage package, which I find interesting. It also has Urza Saga, but it has a small Trinket Mage toolbox with Pithing Needle, Shadow Spear, and Spellbomb.
And the artifact land, I'm
right. Is it?
I'm looking.
No, it's not included. No,
it seems like I don't know. I don't know if I'd call it a mistake, but it seems like a mistake to me. Because
maybe it's a conscious decision.
If you're on 3 mana, it costs you maybe sometimes not being able to trigger Mystic Sanctuary, but you're playing Castle Vantress and Dust Bowl and Fairy Conclave, so there's going to be times where that gets in the way of triggering Mystic Sanctuary as well. But you don't have a land to, he doesn't have a land to go and get with the Trinket Mage, which is sometimes the best line.
Yeah, can be relevant. That's right.
Yeah.
But I would expect that that's a conscious decision, as some inclusions here look very special to me, so I think it's well thought out, and he might have had something in mind not including it. A couple of interesting ones. I mean, Subtlety, yeah, I think I would include it in blue control decks as well. I've played it in Grazilax as a tempo version, and Subtlety is currently obviously played in blue decks due to Minsc and Boo being around. Then there's also Mindbreak Trap against the Storm deck. I like that one. And you have Commit as mid-game removal. And the second part, Memory, is like a wheel effect, which can be quite good with Nazit or Hullbreacher on board. That's something you shouldn't forget about. And apart from that, most cards are usual includes for
standard,
mono blue, apart from Dress Down, but this one has been played more and more. We've also seen it in Teferi lists, I think, when people tested the 6-mana Teferi when it was unbanned again. And it's probably, I like the card a lot. You can do a lot of shenanigans with it.
You can put a 3/3 Gilded Drake onto the board on your side with it.
Yep, right.
And that's like the only synergy that I see in the deck, but there's definitely things you can do against opponents' cards with it as well. It kills all the Saga tokens. It can remove hexproof so that you can bounce something to counter it on the way down again. And there's, I think it's a good toolbox card. And the downside isn't that bad. You're cantripping for 2 mana at the end of the turn.
Yeah,
that can be good too.
Potentially, it can save you a turn. For example, I just have the Storm deck in mind again. If you take away Painter's ability, the turn your opponent is activating the Grindstone, for example, or many more things. Taking away abilities from creatures is most often not the worst. But yeah, I still think I'm still surprised, or I'm not really surprised that Gitrog won the event, because that deck, if piloted correctly or well, you can really score some great results. It's a very powerful deck, but it's also hard to pilot. Definitely takes some time to get into it. And if we look at the list, I think like 90% of the slots are definitely fixed. Like you wouldn't think about.
Yeah, I agree.
About cutting any of these, but then you have like maybe it's even less. Like maybe there are like 5 slots to play around with, and we see Noxious Grasp here to destroy Minsc and Boo, and we have also a Baleful Mastery, also a card to remove Planeswalkers. So he made some slight adaptations. Culling Ritual is an interesting one to me. There might be situations in which it's even awkward to cast this card because you have Heartless Summoning on board, or an Exploration or something.
Or squandered resources.
I think, I thought about the resources as well, but most of the times I think the resources is only played if you are close or about to go off with Gitrog already.
True. Then again, when you say things like Heartless Summoning, I agree. Exploration, by the time you're casting Culling Ritual for value, a lot of the time your Exploration isn't going to be worth that much to you anymore. Because I think the Gitrog deck doesn't use those Brahmin Up Excavator or Crucible of Worlds loops that aggressively, because you're usually going off by the time you get to that stage. And the Exploration, if it means that you can cast the Culling Ritual and the Exploration gives you the mana you need to cast the Gitrog off that, that can be a very powerful sequence.
Sure. Actually, the interaction with Excavator and Crucible is the only one I had in mind that would prevent you from casting Culling Ritual, or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Willing to get rid of Exploration.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then there also might be situations in which Zuran Orb against aggressive decks might be a good one. But on the other hand, Culling Ritual might take care of the creatures your opponent has on board. Yeah. And Pithing Needle needs to stick as well. But I think most often there's a way around that. And yeah, it's an interesting include.
Especially with how much this deck has the ability to get cards back from its graveyard.
That's true.
Seasons past and stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's I think the Balaget recovery, is it in the list? I don't see it, so probably not in this one. I've seen it. Some version play it. Maybe he cutted it for the sideboard slots against Minsc and Boo. Yeah, as that was more important. But we have regrowth here.
Something that I'd like to mention that is quite interesting when you look at this top 16 is the oldest card, the oldest commander being played here is Gitrog.
Right.
Which is decently old at this point. And the Gitrog list has been kind of very similar since its inception, and there have only been minor adjustments with better cards being printed. And then the next oldest card is niv-mizzet, which has also been very similar since the day that it was printed, with it becoming better and better with better cards being printed.
But just to interrupt here, we have to distinguish between the control version and the mid-range version, because the mid-range version that plays a lot of dual-colored cards and very creature-based with some ramp creatures like mana dogs and stuff. This one was very popular for quite some time, and here we see a control version. So this one could also be some kind of a breach deck. Izika, I mean. Not Underworld Breach.
Yes. Yep. And then the next oldest card is Hogak.
In the top 16,
and
yeah.
In the top 16. And since then, it's like cards that have been printed in the last 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So lots and lots of recent commanders. We don't have many old commanders that are being actively played at tournaments. A lot of it is just this card was printed in the last set or 2 or 3, and people are playing it, which is an indication of power creep.
That's true. And also, if we check the rebound event on the second day, it's pretty much the same. We also have a Gidrock in top 8. And then there is Jeska and Ikra, which is an interesting partner combination. We don't see that many partner combinations at all after the change. So there is Lucas and Lurus, as we mentioned a couple of times already, here in Germany as well as in Czech. Jeska and Ludovic is quite popular, as people like to play this is a tempo style, and this partner combination offers a nice way of playing this deck, or this enabling this playstyle. And then we also have some more exotic picks, I would say. Like the last FNM here in Darmstadt, someone played Tevesh and Prava, a deck that also looked fine to me. But apart from that, most often people do not decide to pick the partner decks, or not even experiment with some partner variations these days.
For good reason.
Yeah, for good reason, obviously, of course. And I mean, we were in a position, usually the whole Darmstadt community was super much, or I could even say the German community was super much invested into playing and abusing partner combinations or variations.
I think abuse is a strong word, but yes, I agree.
Abuse in a way that, if we think about Alluran Piles, for example, then when we might have abused some partner variations, but we were definitely very motivated to touch any partner pile. I think that's
true.
Yeah. And if we check the list, it looks cool. It's a mid-rangey Junt list with some additional spells that give the opportunity to have a fast finish with Jeska. Like we see Berserk, we see Invigorate, and apart from that, it's the best things Junt has to offer, I would say. And then there is, if we're talking about old commanders, there is Prosh in the top 16. It's also quite an old card. I'm not sure when it was printed. I think
2013.
2013. I think Gidrock is younger than Prosh, right? Is that correct?
Yes. The Prosh is from the second set of commander decks that came out, which are quite old nowadays, and printed much before Theros even came out.
Yeah.
And Gidrock is from Eldritch Moon, or not, from Shadow of Innistrad.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the deck, it's similar to Gidrock. It has like a core of cards that never changes. It plays some fast mana, ramp, some rocks and all that stuff, and some synergizing cards, Shared Animosity and Pattern of Rebirth and whatsoever. And then Wizards is printing new cards all over again, like Mayhem Devil and stuff like this that sees play every now and then. And yeah, I think it's a powerful deck. It's a bit of a coin flip to play Prosh from my experience, so that's why sometimes it's less popular these days, I think. But it could also has to do with Wizards is constantly feeding us with new commander choices, and I
think something that's interesting about this Prosh list is the amount of planeswalkers it plays and the amount of mid-range slots.
That's right.
So when you look at it and you see a Fury and a Glorybringer and an opposition agent, they're powerful cards, but I think in Prosh lists of the past they wouldn't have had a place. I don't know what it's like now, but like Minsk and Boo and Vivian, they're both cards that don't really do the thing that, or the type of things that the Prosh list of the past would have been trying to do. There are cards that aren't in here, like Elvish Spirit Guide or Simian Spirit Guide.
right.
This list doesn't play a City of Traitors, so it's definitely a lot less all in than Prosh lists have been in the past.
True. Adds a bit more consistency. We also have Grist, which is quite a good card for most Golgari or aggressive or mid-rangey Golgari decks.
Yeah.
So that's a nice include for sure.
Namely exclusions like Tainted Strike or Berserk. There's no Zulaport Cutthroat. So the list is a significant amount different than the kind of all-in variants.
But we have a Blood Artist at least.
We do have a Blood Artist, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the question, the remaining question is we have a ban list update or a format update on Monday. Yeah, we will see. I think as I said in the beginning, that Minsc and Boo is the most debated commander. Maybe some people also think Rafine could be a problem.
I think when you look at the top 8 of that Zup.
Yeah, but also apart from that,
5 Rafines in it is, yeah.
It looks a bit problematic at first, but I also think that players, or from what I've heard, players weren't really prepared for the deck, and it has some natural predators. For example, the hard control piles like Tivit. I would imagine Aminato having a good time against it as well, and there are more control decks that are played. It's very streamlined, the deck, the tempo version, like dropping creatures, having some counter backup, trying to grow your bodies with connive, and winning the game by damage. So yeah, of course the ward from Rafine is annoying every now and then, but overall this deck is definitely beatable, also by more like fast aggressive decks. I think it's Yuri, for example, is also not the most easiest matchup for Rafine. That's, for example, a deck we haven't seen here at the Prime event now. It got quite popular recently as some kind of aristocrats deck. You see it everywhere. We have a passionate Rakdos player here in Darmstadt who picked it up. We even had at our last big event in February, we had someone playing Yuri, and you see it in a lot of French events and also Philippine. I don't know if the Czech guys picked it up as well, but it's definitely an interesting pile. So we will see what next Monday is going to bring, if we have another 2 months with the Hamster or maybe without.
I think something that the point that I talked about earlier with the amount of new commanders that are in the command zones of these big events, that's kind of, thinking about it changes my attitude to the ban list a little bit, because Wizards seems to be consistently printing new and good commanders, and we have to hope that the Duel Commander Committee kind of bans those that are too good, but however many they have been and will continue to be banning, there seems to be an endless stream of good new stuff coming. And even if you have a slightly smaller pool that maybe you can put 2 or 3 decks together, even if your commander gets banned, there's likely going to be another printing of a card in the same or similar color combinations, where you can just, play the next best version in a year or two when the next best commander comes out.
Yeah, that's true. I even thought about, I don't know, what do you think about this thought concept for players who do not have a huge Duel Commander pool, just having either Kari, Zeph, or Isamaru as a backup deck for big events? Like, for example, if there is a new set coming out and you have 1 week to go for your event, and either you have, like, maybe a ban list change is in before of that event, so you have to fear that this card is going to be banned and you have prepared with this list, or you don't have the time or money to put your hands on this list. and I'm losing my point here.
Yeah, I get your point. I think that's an interesting thought. Something that is not a problem for me, but it's something that I like. I like doing things in my decks. I like having lots of decisions.
Sure.
And blue is a color that does that pretty well. Black is a color that does that pretty well. Green also has those kind of decisions quite a bit, where you have tutors or cantrips and stuff like this, or you're deciding when and what to interact with what your opponent's doing. And white and red are two colors that do that quite a bit less than other colors do.
That's correct.
So,
I think Isamaru is probably more close to that aspect compared to Karizev.
Yes, yes.
But then again, both decks are very, very budget friendly.
Exactly.
That's a huge benefit to me. And also, sometimes, let's be honest, you don't always want to bring your Storm combo whatsoever more difficult pile to pilot to an event. So sometimes it's just relaxing to pick up this red deck and just cast your balls and stuff. Of course, there's some decision making included, but you can just it's not very hard to play red deck wins. Yeah, it's hard to master this deck for sure, but it's not hard to play. And sometimes it can just be relaxing. And before you decide to not play the event, you usually was motivated for, you have this backup deck. And it's also, I think, from a mental standpoint, it's also much more relaxing to know, okay, I always have a deck to fall back onto if something happens I didn't calculate it, and I can still play this pile. I think that's very, very nice to have that, instead of for example, back in the days when there was the ESMO ban. It was prior to our event in October, and many players were like, that's very frustrating, because I was planning to play this deck, I played it for some time now, I pimped my pile and I tuned the deck and whatsoever, and now it's just gone. And within less than 7 days, I have to decide what I'm going to play.
Yep.
And for these situations, to avoid that, for multiple reasons, I think it's not the worst idea to get your hands on either of these decks.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's definitely, if it's gonna result in you not playing an event when you're, for some reason, when you can't play your main deck.
Yeah, exactly.
Then having a deck on hand, also being able to lend it to a friend if you can invite them to, grow the format in the sense where you have, the sign of life in the format is how many people come to the big events. And if you can motivate your friends to come by giving them red deck wins or Isamaru when they don't have a Duel Commander deck, or for some reason they don't want to be playing the one that they do have because they don't think it has the ability to win. Those decks always have some ability to win.
Yeah.
And even if it's, if some of the matchups are 40-60 or 35-65, you still have the ability to pull out ahead, and more niche, more difficult to pilot decks kind of can get in the way of that sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, I think we wrap it up here.
Yeah, I think
we've talked a lot about
talk.
Yeah, but it's good. I mean, a lot of things happened in the last weeks, despite some players might have been on vacation already. But Duel Commander the community is back to being very active, if we compare to the last 2 years, which was
pre-COVID times. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so just a short information, if you haven't checked or if you haven't seen our post on YouTube, we are still waiting for the committee to confirm a date, and once that's done, we can start with the interview, and then we will share it with you. We're very, very curious on how that goes, and I'm looking forward to it.
Same.
Okay. As always,
thanks for watching, everyone.
Yes, and enjoy your games, enjoy your summer. Bye bye, guys.